review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the emptiness coach, no other than Mr. J. Ramsden. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. J. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Hey, Daniel, thanks so much for having me. I am Jay Ramsden, the emptiness coach on TikTok and Instagram, and I am a certified and personal and executive coach. And I help people answer the question, now what, once the kids leave home? And it's all about figuring out what comes next in our second act, our second chapter, if you will, of life. And I've done a lot of work on my own to inform myself on what that journey looks like. And I just really love connecting with people to help them figure out what does life look like once the kids have left home.
Mr. J. Ramsden, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. How did the reality of becoming an empty nester truly feel for you? And was it more loss, freedom, or uncertainty, or a mix?
I think it was a mix, Daniel. For me in particular, I was Mr. Logistics of the house. My wife and I both worked in education. She had a lot of meetings after school. I was more in tech at the time. I was a chief information officer, so I could really do my work from anywhere. And so throughout life, I was the one who kind of ran the household, making sure that the kids had their homework done and were able to do carpools and have their lunch and grocery shopping and laundry and all the things that a primary caregiver would do for folks. And then when they both moved into their very first adult apartments 1 week apart, that is when it hit me that my life as Mr. Logistics was coming to an end. And so I needed to figure out what life looked like for me because I was the caregiver. I always loved to help people and look out for them. Like, what does life look for me now that the kids are, starting to adult? And that's when I started to explore kind of my life. And I got really intentionally curious about what that meant for me and what came next. And that led me to quite a number of adventures over the last couple of years, in addition to becoming an entrepreneur and starting my own business as a life coach.
What specifically made you look at Mount Kilimanjaro and think, that's what I need to do next? What is a sudden impulse or growing desire?
So the question was, I was at a point in my life. I was did that 2 years ago. I was 55, and I just said, you know what? At this point in my life, I'm just going to say yes to everything. And so my sister-in-law actually asked me if she had interest in doing it. She asked me, do you want to come along for the journey? And because I was saying yes to things in my life at this point, I said, yes, let's do it. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But it was such an amazing journey to go on that experience with her and with others. We were with a group of 11 people who successfully summited Mount Kilimanjaro in October of 2023. And that journey in and of itself, and I don't know if you know much about Mount Kilimanjaro, but it has four distinct um, climates. So you start off in a rainforest where it's kind of hot and humid, and then
Mhm.
you move through kind of the moorlands, and then the Arctic desert, and then the Arctic at the top. And so every few days, you're experiencing a new climate, a new challenge, something that was coming at you a little bit differently. So it led me to kind of come up with my life motto, which is every step has purpose, because that's literally what I said to myself every single step to get to the top.
Mr. J, was Kilimanjaro primarily a physical goal or a symbolic act of reclaiming your identity or both?
I think it was more a mental goal than anything else. It wasn't physically challenging, yes, but I think the mental toughness that I needed and also the self reflection along that journey is really what I needed to get to the top. So while it was, arduous to do that climb, and we did it over 5 days, for me, it was more about what's inside up here than it was my physical body.
What was the most common reaction? or doubt you heard from others when you announced your plan? What is your own biggest internal doubt?
Yeah, so the biggest internal doubt was, can I really do this? I wasn't a hiker. I wasn't a climber. I am now. I hike regularly and climb mountains regularly, but at the time it was like, ooh, can I really do this? Do I have the mental toughness to do it? Do I also have the physical toughness to do it? And there were certain times throughout that journey where I kind of doubted if I could do it. The very first day, the rest of the group were all folks who were probably more physically fit than I was, and they got to the first camp an hour and a half
Wow.
before I did. And, during there were times on that I was like, "Ooh, is this the right thing for me to be doing? Yeah, can I do this?" But what I realized is, going back to the motto of every step has purpose, is like, yeah, if I just put one foot in front of the other, I don't have to be first. I just need to finish. And so there is a Swahili saying that says, it goes pole pole, which just means slowly, slowly. And so that's kind of how I live life now, is like, hey, you don't have to go fast. You can go slow to go fast and still accomplish your goals.
Yes, slowly but surely, people. And how do you sense of self or purpose start to change once your primary role as a hands-on parent shifted?
Yeah, it changed for me in that I became very aware that I was more than just that person. I was more than the parent who was Mr. Logistics. There's lots of different parts to me. And I feel like lots of people, parents in particular, get lost in the sense of being a parent as opposed to being themselves. Right? We identify, I know it's particularly here in the US, we'll hear, well, that's Billy's mom or Susie's dad, and we're known that way. And some parents really embrace that identity and they forget who they are as individuals. And I think that's where my journey started, was on Kilimanjaro, was like, no, I'm a person who can do hard things. I can take that next step. I can figure out what comes next for me. And so that really informed my journey.
Yes, interesting indeed. Interesting journey as well. And what aspect of the preparation or the climb itself surprised you the most physically, mentally, or logistically?
Yeah, I figured out what I think what surprised me the most is that you can actually figure out a rhythm in your climbing, with the guides got us kind of set up in such that the people who are a little bit slower could go first and then everybody else would catch up. But I realized I could finish the same time as everybody else if I did the journey alone rather than together, and I could leapfrog people. So if I started off early and stopped and then they would pass me, I could keep going. When they were stopped, I could pass them. So it was kind of this leapfrog thing. And then I was ending up actually either finishing slightly before or just at the same time as the rest of the group, who were actually faster hikers than I was. So sometimes it's okay to go the journey alone. And I think when we get into our empty nest years, sometimes we forget that it's okay, right? We've raised our kids, they're off doing their thing, they're exploring. We can also explore ourselves.
Definitely. Another chapter of our lives, as they said. Describe the mental and emotional landscape during the toughest parts of the ascent, especially summit night. What kept you putting one foot in front of the other?
Yeah, so on summit night, we get up early. And so initially on summit night, you'll get up around 11 o'clock and leave at 12 a.m. and hike for several hours in the dark to get to the top at sunrise. Our lead guide decided we were going to do it a little bit differently. So I think we got up at 2 or 3 and began our hike. So we had less time. We weren't on the summit for sunrise, but knowing what was coming, right, goes a long way to be prepared for it. But sometimes in life we're not prepared for what's coming. And so for me, I think the difficult part was, okay, we're going to get up really early. I'm already an early riser as it is, but several hours before, will I have the stamina to get to the top? It's a 10-hour hike from the base camp to the top. And so even though it's only 2,000 feet or 2,000 meters, it's a 10-hour walk because air is limited. And so it was like, will I be able to sustain myself? Right? Lots of doubt comes in. And I got to a certain point and I was like, now I'm going to take 50 steps, stop and rest. 50 steps, stop and rest. Then it was 30 steps, stop and rest. 30 steps, stop and rest. 15 steps, stop and rest. And that's how I kind of guided myself to the top. Oftentimes, when we're living life, we want to make this big jump and go, from point A to point B in one big jump or one big step. And sometimes we have to take lots of tiny steps to get to the top of the mountain, if you will.
Mr. J, what old priorities, habits, or even relationships naturally fell away after this experience? What new one emerged?
Yeah, so after the Kilimanjaro trip, the new experience that emerged or the new routine that emerged for me was spending every weekend walking and or hiking. And so that hadn't been the case before, and also taking better care of my body has become a priority for me. In that journey kind of informed me, okay, I can do hard things, but if I want to continue to do them, I have to take better care of myself. I have to be focused on my body, what goes into it, and then also take care of it throughout the week so I can still do hard things on the weekend. And so if I found a group of people, that's a new habit that I hike with them every Sunday, and we do anywhere from 5 to 8 to 10 miles, either trails or hills or even mountains. And so that's something that emerged for me as something new from tackling this one big journey up Mount Kilimanjaro.
Mr. J, as emptiness coach, what are your short term and long term goals?
Well, my short term goals are continue to um, kind of help people bring value to their lives through my social media channels, to help them see that that there are lots of possibilities in life once the kids leave home, to kind of even be a living example of that. We talked about Kilimanjaro, but I recently also did walk the Camino de Santiago in Spain, for 5 days to continue that journey. And so I just want to be an example of what's possible in our 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. I don't want to stop. And then long term goals are to continue to build my brand, This Emptiness Life. I have a podcast that's called This Emptiness Life. It's my coaching business. And so I eventually want to build that brand up into things that make it possible for empty nesters to embrace life now that the kids are grown and flown.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. J, and looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there want to be a podcast host and want to be a coach like you?
I think it's just to get intentionally curious about what you want from life. If it's a podcast host, great. If you want to be a life coach, that's great too. If you want to explore something else, it's just being open to opportunities, saying yes to things, and getting really intentionally curious about what you want from life right now in your 50s and 60s.
Hmm. Nice. Thank you for your advice, Mr. J. And can you please recommend a book that influenced your journey?
Yeah, then the number one book, I've read it at least 3 times now. I have it right here. It's called Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. It's earmarked so many
Yes.
times with lots of questions. What I love about the book itself is it's just this guide that helps you explore kind of how inner quietness can lead to clarity and purpose and resilience in this really chaotic world. And what I like about it, it is organized into 3 parts: the mind, the spirit, the body, and it gives us practical and powerful introspective questions like, what is it that I might want to do each day to find more time for silence? And what comes first, confidence, or is it doing that builds confidence? Yeah, it asks questions like, how important is connectedness in our lives? And so it was such an impactful book for me. I like to read it about every 6 months, or at least once a year, to continue helping me build my journey, to continue pushing me forward. I always find something new in it whenever I open it up.
Thank you for that recommended book, Mr. J. Hoping our listeners and viewers will, wow, read it. For sure, you will empower. And For someone feeling stuck in their own emptiness or life transition, what is the very first practical step you advise them to take towards rewriting the script?
I think rewriting the script, the very first thing you can do is start to answer the two questions: what now and what's next? And don't be afraid to answer those questions for yourself. Sometimes we get wrapped up in being afraid of what comes next for us in our lives, not just in empty nesting, and all different life transitions, whether it's we're getting divorced or starting a new career or going off to school or having kids. It doesn't matter where you are or what you do, those questions all come up: what now and what's next for me in my life. And that's the number one key, is exploring those two questions and just spending a lot of time doing it. Don't do it quickly. Write down things every day to answer those questions and do some self exploration around them.
Yes, definitely. And how has the journey impacted your relationship with your now adult children or your understanding of your role in their lives?
I think what it's done, my journey has actually impacted my kids because they see me as somebody who's just not waiting around to become involved in their lives, waiting for
Mm.
them to get engaged or get married or have kids, but that I'm off doing things and that I can be an example for what's possible at this stage in life.
Mr. J, what's the biggest misconception people have about undertaking such significant challenge later in life that you'd like to correct?
I think the misconception is that people believe they can't do it. Right? They kind of limit themselves in what they believe they're able to do. I call them the contractions of life. I can't, I shouldn't, I won't, I don't know how, that's impossible. I can't be doing that. I don't know how to do it. All of those things keep us from actually taking action in our lives. And I think that's the biggest misconception, is that you can. You can literally do anything with the power of positive thought, with taking a look inside and being self aware in terms of how you operate, and then answering questions for yourself along those lines, like, what do I want to do next? What do I want my life to look like if I'm not waiting around to get involved in other people's lives?
Definitely. And how can someone identify their own version of Kilimanjaro, a meaningful challenge that signifies their next chapter, even it's not literally mountain?
Yeah, everybody has a mountain to climb. I actually did a physical one, but we all have our own mental mountains that we have to climb. And so I think the very first thing is to just allow yourself to say, what's in front of me? What's holding me back? A lot of
Yes.
times it's because we aren't comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that is because our brain's job is to keep us safe. And so when we say, "Oh, I'm going to do something like that, if I'm going to get outside my comfort zone," it feels uncomfortable to do that. And so your brain's like, "Oh yeah, don't do that. Like, I'm right here. Don't do that. That's not good for you." And so something could happen. That's what your brain's job is. So it slows you down, which is often times why people feel so stuck. But you kind of have to burst through that barrier and say, "Ooh, I can get comfortable with being uncomfortable." So what's the very easiest thing to do? Maybe it's even just, hopping in the car and going to the next town over and having lunch by yourself. Lots of people don't know how to do that, or don't have a desire to do that, but that's kind of the easiest first step, even to say, "Oh, I can go and do that. I can go into a restaurant and have lunch by myself." And that's okay. Like, I can be comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling.
Mr. J, having gone through these, how would you now define what fulfilling second act truly means? Is it about achievement, growth, contribution, or something else?
I think the second act, when we do things, and I've done some big things in life with Kilimanjaro and Santiago, and learning how to scuba dive and some other things in this second act. I think it is, you don't have to do the really big things. It's just saying to yourself, is it possible for me to do something different? Is it possible for me to figure out what comes next? Right? We don't want to be limited by what our brain tells us we can and cannot do.
Hmm. Beautifully articulated, Mr. J. Very well said. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love letters in its third season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in its fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Mr. J, if you could give just one piece of recommendation to someone standing at the threshold of their own second act, feeling both excited and terrified, what would it be?
The advice would be take that next small step. Doesn't have to be a leap, one small step. That's it.
Yes, baby steps, people. Mr. J. Ramsden, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast, your advocacy, or any projects that you're doing right now?
Yep. You can find all the information about me at thisemptynestlife.com as my podcast, my socials. You can find me as the Empty Nest Coach on TikTok and Instagram. And I look forward to seeing you there.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. J. Ramsden because if you support him for sure, more and more empowering episodes of the podcast itself, more and more empowering, well, coaching to come for sure, and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Mr. J, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Daniel. It was a pleasure.
More to come, people. See you soon.